Okay, let me get started with the presentation. Originally, I kind of, kept getting more and more concerned because, with the internet coming up, we have more and more people just posting stuff online, and regular people just don't know. Is it science? A few years ago, it may have been, funny or curious. Someone asked me, "Oh yeah, have you heard about like this? Sometime in December, Earth is going to be shrouded in 3 days of darkness." And I'm like, "What?" And it's like, okay, funny, curious, but I think by now we've gotten to a point where, things that are shared claim to be scientific or they claim to be factual, and people believe that that can actually kill them. So I guess now we have to end we cannot entertain any bovine excrement anymore, and we have to kind of dig in and say, okay, we've got to save lives here. So how can you tell if anybody from any source comes to you and spouts out any claim? Is it science or not? And then by extension, is it factual or not? Or is it what they claim it is? Or are they who they claim they are? Is it authentic or not? Is it real? So that's basically the question. How can we go about answering that question? So I went around and looked at high and low and far and all over the place. It turns out people were already getting concerned with fake news, particularly journalists, the journalistic profession, because they have very high standards, and now that anybody's getting in on the game, the standards are pretty much going to join bye-bye, so that they have a big stake in the game. The whole concern with fake news already started in 2014. I think that's when Finland got in on it, and so this all predated the current administration, and I think it pretty much came social media just so much more. They integrated, and the platforms are so much bigger. So pretty much anybody could post anything and sell it as anything for any reason. And the users of social media and media in general are very well equipped to tell what's the what. So by now, our lives depend on it. Going forward, we need to make sure that whatever people are telling us is actually factual. Our decisions of who we're going to vote into power, or even locally, regionally, state, nationally, that what they tell us is actually what's really going on. Our lives depend on it. So I'm trying to advance my slides. Death. You don't know, now you know. So in the end, you cannot assign the responsibility to anyone else to determine what goes into your mind. You are the ultimate gatekeeper. So I started thinking about it a little bit in terms of martial arts. We see all these martial arts fighters, self-defense techniques and all that. Well, in the end, your mind is your most important tool with which you interact with the environment. Your mind controls your body. So, your mind is going to determine the future that you have. So we need to really start self-defense for our mind. And we can't just, wave it off. Oh, everything is the TLDR, too long, didn't read. Okay, suit yourself, but you might be letting all kinds of things affect your mind. You are the ultimate gatekeeper, and you cannot pass that buck on to anyone else. Little slide here. Yourself, your mind, defend it. You can't count on anyone else to do it. I started this project in my class at the beginning of the semester, so it's still pretty new and it hasn't totally come to fruition yet. So, My students in the two of my lecture classes just had the basic introduction to the scientific method. And you can easily look that up online, make an observation, come up with a hypothesis, then design a test to test your hypothesis. So you go out back into reality to see if what you're hypothesizing actually describes what's going on or not, and then, either toss the hypothesis or refine it or be happy that it's confirmed, but then go on with a grain of salt that it might change in the future based on new experimentation and input. So that's kind of the scientific method in a nutshell. And that's all they had. And I'm thinking, well, let's give them two articles that are about comparable subjects and see if they can figure out which one is on the up and up side, realistically speaking, and which one not so much. But then in the process, I also asked students what would be their criteria for deciding if a source is legit or if it's not. And they came up with a really good collection between the two classes. And it was sort of like, I didn't have a pick and choose, and it was a free answer. People could just write down anything, they could come up with. So we have things like the legitimacy of your sources and references, compare whatever you read to independent other sources, look for how much detailed, factual versus opinion information is there. Is the info based on interviews with experts? Is data provided? You visit a couple of fact-checking websites. Did the article pass peer review? Are the images and graphs and videos legit? Is the info current? Because oftentimes, you don't even see a date, or if you look for a date, you see that the info is from a few years ago. It's just somebody's posting it to get another rise out of people. How many steps removed? Did the journalist interview a scientist, and then the scientist is the original source, or is it just the journalist reviewing an article from another journalist? So, how far is it removed, or did you hear about it from your best bud? Then check the wording. Is it easy to follow, unambiguous, or confusing, or misleading, inappropriate? Is the tone pragmatic, realistic, or is it outlandish, sensational, or manipulative? Any spelling and grammar mistakes? We can probably think that professional journalists, they're trained, and if they get like a bachelor's degree or go even further in the field of writing, you would think that they adhere to very high standards in terms of grammar, basic composition, and all kinds of other things. So spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, those are already big red flags. So that's just as far as the information is concerned. What about the author or the platform or the media source? So always check for credentials, for the reputation, other works the author has done. Are there any sponsors in the background? Who provided the money? Who's the author? What could be the intention or the motivation of the author be? Are there any biases by the author or by the platform? Always go to the about page to check for the legitimacy. And then, of course, if the about page is entirely missing, big red flag. Also, look at the background of the accompanying ads. Is the author self-promoting? Is it clickbait? Or is it just, third source ads that the outlet is trying to finance themselves with? How long have you been familiar with the publisher or the author? So that can sort of tell you, usually, the author's on the up and up, so you're more likely to trust them than if you've never heard of the author or the source of publication. And then, of course, other things like, do they state their corrections policies? Do they have fair publishing policies? Is their design of high quality? Like the web pages, are they busy? Do things flicker in and out? Are the fonts bad? like in comparison with the colors, whatever. So, are they easy to navigate, or are they a nightmare? Do you have to go through many clicks? So those types of things. And then, of course, another important one, what kind of genre do those sources belong to? Like, obviously, if a friend shares a meme with you, that's more like satire. So there may not be all that much factual content to it. Some sources are a little bit more sneaky. They look serious and legit, but then when you go to the page, you might see that they're satire or social commentary. Come up with something like that. So overall, I was really impressed that and it was sort of the first 14 students that turned in or answered that question. They came up with a lot of things, and it turns out. Before Christmas last semester, I actually went through a bunch of international fact-checking or sources. There were public libraries, educational libraries, educational institutions, and the whole bunch of sources posted tools for what you can check for to make sure that a source or that some information is legit. And I collected it, and what I called it is the Information Sources Authenticity Checklist. And since we're doing astronomy, I posted it on the link here, sites.gsu.edu, ASTR 1010 lab /ISAC. So the ISAC, the Information Sources Authenticity Checklist. Again, this is my collection, so I'm not really taking a lot of credit for it or put a lot of value into it. But what I came up with, just looking at lots of different sources that offer tools, those criteria are very similar to what my students came up in their crowdsourcing. So basically the same kind of things. Look for the sponsors, how many steps away are, look for fact-checking sites. So you can look over this. Is there a lot of emotion involved, or is it more factual? Look at the date. And then one of the things that I wanted to say about the late breaking, that's an important issue, because I was revisiting about the COVID-19. I was revisiting one of the fact-checking sources, and they actually looked at an article that kind of predicted what is going on right now back in February, and they listed it as a little bit alarmist. And I'm thinking that goes straight into the category of late breaking. So any information that is late breaking, you can see the facts, but if there's any kind of evaluation or opinions that people are forming, that is very, very tentative, because especially with the coronavirus, there's so much information. So in 2, 3, or even 10 years, we'll have so much more information. We'll know so much more about, when it really all started, who really were the first patients, when it really was, came to the other countries. Anything right now is still very, very tentative and might even change like 180 degrees or not. So we don't know. So that's why we have to take any kind of information, even factual information that we receive right now about the coronavirus pandemic with a large grain of salt. It's all late breaking, so we have to closely monitor it and best stick, with the sciences, with those that are used to interpreting science, with the expert. They know best. Look for positive, negative languages. And then another thing with online sources that I wanted to call attention to, a lot of sources that try to dupe people, they try to mirror or imitate and look like a real legit source. But then when you look at their URL might end with .lo or .co. So it's not like .com or .edu or .gov. One of the more prevalent domain names, but it's something obscure. So that's really a big tip off. Quick Google wiki review, of the author or the publisher or the site. Another thing is there a private or obscure email associated with, the contact information, if there's contact information at all. That's another giveaway. And yeah, sketchy hyperlinks. Another important one that you can do with Google would be to look for bad images. You can do a reverse search. And if you go into my document or just Google how to image, so any image that any source, maybe even in a meme that you want to follow up on, you can do a Google reverse search on the image and see other images that I like, and then where the sources are coming from. So as you can see, a lot of the criteria that I've culled from other sources about what to look for, my students had already come up with, and I was so amazed and also encouraged by that. Okay, one source or one conglomerate sort of that I wanted to point out. You may have heard about the Pointer organization. It's a nonprofit. I'll show it on another slide. But basically, they've already existed since 1975, so they're not new, and they're funded by sponsors from all over the board, all kinds of political persuasions or not. So they founded the International Fact-Checking Network in 2015. And this International Fact-Checking Network will certify fact-checking sources like PolitiFact, for example, or factcheck.org, and not just nationally here in the U.S., but they are an international group of fact-checking specialists and journalists by training, maybe even librarians, the expertise of our librarians. So they've come together and they've come up with a code, which includes nonpartisanship and fairness. So they have to apply the same standards. So if there's somebody who wants to be a legit fact checker, they have to apply the same standards and the same process for all and have to be evidence-based. So they cannot publish any conclusions or opinions on fact-checked issues. Stick with the facts, stick with the evidence. They have to be transparent about their sources. So details on sources that the reader, sorry, I've got a dog in the background who's just discovered a squeaky toy. So there's a reader that the reader can verify. So anything that is published with the article or so, the reader has to be able to track back on their own and publish and look back at the sources, the data, and everything else. Where does the funding come from? What's the background of all the employees? What's the legal status? Is it for-profit? Is it non-profit? And, of course, clear and current contact info. So if you have any questions, suggestions, you need to be able to reach people and get a reply in short order. Then also the methodology of fact-checking has to be explained in great detail. So not just, oh, yeah, we're great fact-checkers, and then hamana, this source is legit. No, like, what method are you using? So basically, it's like demanding from a scientist published in a peer review journal, what are your methods? You need to be as detailed enough so that any other scientists can recreate your method and verify your results. And then, of course, a big thing, and this is also comes from the world of science, well, depending on future data, future reviews, anything else coming up that hasn't occurred to the person at the time, the context can change. So people may have to adjust their models, their hypotheses, their theories, and when that happens, that needs to be publicized to everyone who's been reading their previous hypotheses, theories, and so forth. So this is really a huge thing that any source, any fact-checking source that is legit needs to have a published corrections policy and also follow that closely. A little bit more about the Pointer Institute. It was founded in 1975. Then it's a nonprofit school for journalists and publisher of original journalism, and it has core values of accuracy, independence. We're in an independent country. We love our independence. We all need to be independent. That's why we have to make sure we agree with whatever we put into our heads. So collaboration, also very important, because we can all be winners if we collaborate. And then fairness and transparency. Transparency is a big one. If you see a black box, that's a red flag. Why wouldn't anyone share their methods with you? Why wouldn't anyone share their data with you? There's absolutely no reason, if we agree that we're all independent, of equal value. What is it, what you're doing? Just tell me, and then I trust you. Okay, so actually, I just read an article today that this code, the IFCN, has upgraded their code in terms of what they require of organizations that want to be that want to get their seal of approval. So they must be legally registered organization. They must be in the business of fact checking. They must regularly publish. So they must have a history of regularly publishing nonpartisan reports on factual accuracy. And it has to be of public interest. So not some sort of niche topic, esoteric topic. That's not what they're in the business for. It has to be of public interest. So anything by public figures, prominent institutions, widely circulated claims in text, visual, and other formats. So that's where memes and social media come in. Anything that is of public interest that affects the public, this is those kinds of institutions can apply. Now, institutions that will not be granted their seal of approval is anything that is controlled by any state or by any political party or by any politician. So, just don't even try. Now, there are exceptions that they'll make, and one of their independent assessors has to deem them clear that there is a clear and unambiguous separation of editorial control from state or political influence. So they may be funded by state or political sources, but they have to carry out and follow in a consistent manner the code of principles. So so basically the way this IFCN works, they have 7 unpaid counselors. So those are the assessors that will finally make the determination from all over the globe. And then they work with 106 point of contact assessors that are like journalists in their countries. They're the experts in fact checking and media experts. So they're paid a nominal fee for their time. So basically they first vet anything that is submitted to them. And then if they say, that looks legit, let me pass that up to the unpaid counselors, and they'll make the final determination. And if you're wondering, right now there are 76 verified active signatories, and I'm just listing some of them. You can go to their website and see all the others. So AP is verified, Fact Check, PolitiFact, Reuters, Washington Post Fact Checker, the USA Today, Science Feedback, to mention a French example. And then there's the DPA Faktencheck, which is a German example. And these signatories have to be recertified every year because, things change very quickly. And if you've had high standards, all it takes is some new executive coming in, and all of a sudden the vision changes, and then who knows what's going to happen to the institution. So every year, the certification has to be renewed. So currently, there are some expired signatories that have been verified in the past. So you can check if they're currently reapplying for certification or not. One of the German sources, Correct.TV or correctiv.org, is currently expired. Snopes.com is expired. That doesn't mean they're bad. It's just that they haven't reapplied for certification yet. And the Weekly Standard Fact Check also has expired, but could in the future reapply and be recertified. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on these slides. I just wanted to show you, people in the general public don't really seem to appreciate how hard it is to actually publish a scientific paper and what it takes to go through a peer review. They just seem to wave it off. Oh yeah, that's just the opinion of science, and that's just like the ideology of somebody else. So I just wanted to quickly show that for decades, or maybe even over hundreds of years, the Royal Society in Great Britain, Newton was already publishing stuff. So these standards are very, very old, and they're very, very strict, and they're global scientific competing, collaborating institutions or associations in each country. They keep each other in check because they actually, scientists just look at they're waiting for other scientists to make mistakes, and then like, hey, I found your mistake. So I mean, don't think that all scientists are like covering up for each other. That is not the case, because even though they might be collaborating, but they might also be competing. And I mean, we're finding right now in the COVID pandemic, a lot of labs that used to compete to come out with, they wanted to be the first to come out with a vaccine or drugs or whatever. Now they realize, no, we really have to collaborate because people are dying at unprecedented rates. So you can see that there is sort of like an independence mechanism among scientific institutions and associations. They keep each other honest. And those are really rigorous standards that they follow when science is published. So, for example, you can see a lot of what science publishing does is they're basically already living that code of principles. Complete and transparent info, citation, corresponding authors, they have to be easy to find. You have to see their affiliations. There's a way to track other things that they've published. And of course, the publisher has to be easily verifiable. You don't have to read all the details here. There has to be a declaration of the editing process by the publisher, including peer review. Then a complete and extensive list of references in the official standard format that any reader can look up. Then the declaration of the original date, author's contributions, conflict of interest, sources of funding. And those are just like the externalities. So the article itself has to give as much detail as necessary for any other scientists to reproduce, or to theoretically be able to reproduce that every single step of the process. Another subsidiary or constituent of the IFCN, or the Poynter Institute, is a website. It's called Media Bias Fact Check by Poynter, and you can go there, and it's a great resource. They've already fact checked, or they also list the media bias that a source has, and they've already done many examples, many of the mainstream media, and they also list Fox as a mainstream media because obviously many hundreds of thousands of people across the country are watching Fox. So Fox is a mainstream media source, just like CNN. So they're dedicated to educating the public on media bias and deceptive news practices. So they go a step further. They don't just fact check, but they also look for, okay, how much biased is it? It is the most comprehensive media bias resource on the internet, according to their About page. And of course, you can all verify that on your own. And of course, because it is a subsidiary of the Poynter Institute, it follows the IFCN Code of Principles. Now, I had my students review the About and the Methodology page of the Media Bias Fact Check source, which is very extensive and very detailed. But those are my current students, the same group that came up with this really great detailed list of criteria on their own, how they would be able to verify if the source is on the up and up. So just to give a little bit of feedback from my students, overall, I trust that MBFC, Media Bias Fact Check, provides fair and unbiased ratings and are rooted in factual information and fair methodology. So basically, because it follows the IFCN. And I had one student who said that that student was surprised that I do trust the ratings of MBFC. See, I gotta get my little video feed off of here. I do agree. They write their analysis. Well, I do agree with their analysis of CNN's reporting. I looked up their analysis about Fox News and largely agreed with that as well. So give it a look. Check it out for yourself, and you can form your own opinion. Okay, so then right at the beginning of the semester, I gave my students 2 sources and had them use their criteria to rate which of the sources, maybe they're both completely factual, maybe they're both completely pseudoscientific, or it's one of each. So I had both of them decide. One of them was the UFO Sightings Daily source, and this is sort of the front page when you check in on it. You'll list all kinds of indistinguishable or no rhyme or reason news outlets, like, of course, legit ones, but then also RT, by the way, is a Russian publication. So anything that sticks, as seen on. Okay, and then here we have another source that is by CNET. So CNET is the publisher, and basically both articles posted about, any indications, anything shiny on Mars, for example. Does it mean there might be life? What is it? It's definitely something unknown. And the source on UFO Sightings Daily had something about a shiny thing on Ceres, which is one of our major asteroids. Is actually 500 kilometers in diameter, so it's a pretty sizable object, and it's orbiting in the asteroid belt. And we had recently sent a probe there, Dawn, which had taken pictures and came back with, on its approach, there's something shiny. So anyway, so here we have the UFO Sightings Daily reporting on something shiny on a solar system object, and here we have CNET reporting on something shiny on a solar system object. Oops, I'm sorry. I need to go back. Okay, so here's what one of my students came back with, and this is basically like the general consensus. Before I knew about IFCN and MBFC, I used many of the same criteria. It is handy to have MBFC do the fact check. It saves a lot of time. It organizes the information very quickly, so you can decide on its relevance. MBFC came up with the same results as I did from my previous review. CNET was rated high for factual reporting and was also ranked as least biased, similar to my prior results. MBFC said that the UFOSightings.daily.com was under review, but I'm very confident that it would conclude, as I did, that the site was pseudoscience, biased, and not factually correct. So going to MBFC, this is the official rating that it comes back with for CNET. Now, MBFC doesn't rate individual articles. It rates the media platform, or it rates, the publisher, basically. So the publisher, CNET, checks out. You would still have to apply the other criteria for the author, the affiliations and everything to check out, or the information, the sources, the data, where did that come from, to check out that is on the up and up. Now, entering UFO Sightings Daily into MBFC didn't return anything. But what I found, checking it out on Google, MBFC does give you their search bar to search their database, but it also gives you a Google search window. So typing it into the Google search window, I came across an article in the San Francisco Chronicle, but there was a reference, and it looks like the new outlet for the author of the UFO Sightings Daily website has now switched over and opened up a new platform for his musings. and it's called the etdatabase.com. And I've captured the main homepage of the etdatabase.com, and he links it to a YouTube channel that he has set up. But as you can see, it looks similar to the UFOsightingsdaily.com, you know, with its design. So there you have it. You can go and check out. Wait a minute, I just need to be sure. This is the first time I'm leading the talk, so please excuse me. In a nutshell, if you're curious about what UFO Sightings Daily, he is all about taking grainy images that are legit returned by NASA probes or any other original sources, and then he's pixelating them or, you know, enlarging them, enhancing them, and until you can see like structures that look sort of artificial, and then he kind of claims that this is proof for aliens, you know, some alien cultures that other pseudoscientific conspiracy theorists have put already, like, I don't know, reptile people or white glowing people, I don't know, that they've put out on the internet, where you can find tons of references, you know, like shooting fish in a barrel, basically. Whereas the CNET article was just, you know, posting an image of a shiny surface that has been, you know, the rover on Mars took a picture of, you know, and then just, yeah, could it be like a mineralized crystal or, you know, salt or something like that? So basically thrown out natural, most likely explanation, but short or, yeah, did not come to any conclusion. This is proof of anything specific, because in science, we cannot prove anything beyond the shadow of any doubt, but we can support it with lots and lots of data and not finding any data that contradicts it completely. Okay, well, I do want to wrap up shortly. So there's another affiliate with the Poynter Institute, and that is called MediaWise. And I found a really neat YouTube of a YouTuber who's younger than me, maybe with more youth appeal. And he's explaining how to fact check, you know, just very brief with 3 points. And he's also doing it not on a scientific kind of example, but I don't know if you remember about Jason Derulo. There was something going around about him falling down the steps of the Met Gala. And, well, so he's wondering, yeah, so what method can you apply to figure out for yourself if this is actually fact or if this is fiction? So instead of running the YouTube now, it doesn't work all that well with WebEx, I kind of used the closed captioning and made some slides, some composite slides. So anytime you want to see something that you want to share, because, you know, we all like to share, you know, to like get people to laugh or, you know, feel like, hey, we're in a group and we feel the same, have the same kind of humor, we belong. But before you do, please, even if this is lighthearted, you can apply this to pretty much any claim that you come across. There are 3 questions MediaWise wants you to ask. Question 1, who is behind the information? Number 2, what is the evidence? Number 3, what are other sources saying? So by this example, trying to track back, did this actually happen to Jason Derulo? Number 1, who is behind the information? So these are the types of questions you can be asking yourself. Is it like a verified account? Okay, I'm not going to read all the likes because that's not my style. So is it a celebrity blog? Ask Jason Derulo himself. So not only is this tweet from whatever source it was, from none of the above, it was actually from an account that's not verified. It looks like a Stan account on Twitter. And basically, like any Joe Schmo can post about this. And it's probably not reliable information. then what is the evidence? Well, you see this one photo. Is it just this one photo? Well, I mean, the Metro Gala is an event attended by like hundreds of people. Surely there were hundreds of cameras at the event. Shouldn't there be more than one photo circulating of this Jason Derulo falling down the stairs? Maybe even one where you can see that it's actually Jason Derulo. Because if you look at this one photo, it could be anybody, dressed up in a white suit. Well, it seems like, given the context of what supposedly happened, there should be more than just one photo, and there should be more evidence. So that's also a sign that it could be suspicious. Number 3, what are other sources saying? So if you do a Google search, or you can also search on Twitter, so basically where it was published, Facebook, any way you want, you find that this has been debunked several times. And actually, the guy that made the video said that every single year around the time of the Met Gala, it comes back. It's kind of like that planet Nibiru. So anytime scientists find another unknown planet in the solar system or hypothesize based on calculations, that doesn't mean that there isn't one. There could very well be one. And, there's evidence on how to look for one, but it's definitely not Nibiru, the planet of doom that's coming back every year. And that myth of, wiping out human civilization, or you could beam up and, join them on their Nirvana spaceship. That all is bogus, but it comes back every year, every time there's a report on a new planet that's been discovered. Nibiru. So this is one of those Nibiru things that comes back every time the Met Gala occurs. Oh yeah, didn't Jason Derulo fall down the stairs? No, he didn't. He even himself says, this isn't real. It's not true. I did not fall down the stairs. So yeah, yeah, I'm going to collect myself here. It's only your brain, the most important thing that you'll ever have. So it just takes a minute or a second to Google something, to start the search, look for a couple of red flags. It's not like you have to go through the entire view every single time. You just need a snapshot before you make it like a permanent fixture in your brain and a permanent fixture of your worldview. Just, scan, check for a couple of the red flags, and then you can, if you don't find any red flags, you can put more and more trust in it. But if you start coming up with a couple of red flags, take it with a grain of salt. Either like, okay, swipe left, next, or if you're still interested in it, dig a little bit deeper and investigate it a little bit deeper. Your mind depends on it, your future depends on it, and from there on. So let's see, the final thoughts. Of course, my timer is gone. I don't know where it went. This is what one of my students said. Again, I believe these are all tools to help us navigate information, but we, the readers, still need to engage with them and be open to our own biases. So this student actually points out an important point. It's not just the bias in the author or the publication or, those that claim to do the fact checking. It's also your very own biases. And I'm subject to that too. I have, in these days and times, you all have, like, our emotional response comes first. And that may actually prevent us from engaging with a source of information as deeply as it deserves, just because maybe we don't like the data that it's presenting us or so. So it may be painful to look at data we don't like, but in the end, we'll come out for the better because we can create a better future for those that come after us. We owe it to them, that we really, even if reality or the data is painful, we need to look at it and we need to evaluate it critically and try to, keep our emotions out of the picture until we're sure, okay, this is legit. Okay, so just like with COVID-19, treat any claim from any source, no matter how familiar, as potentially infected, unless the reliable and verifiable test you perform shows otherwise. Know your resources and use them well. Here are my suggestions. Again, those are just suggestions, so don't take it just from me alone. The International Fact-Checking Network, the Media Bias Fact Check. There's a great crash course for navigating digital information on YouTube. I mean, if you've heard about the crash course series before, I'm using the crash course series in my astronomy lectures. The crash course makes educational material in a. I mean, it's actually interesting to watch, and it goes fast-paced, funny, little bit cartoon, but still, serious. They make it on all kinds of subjects and fields, so it's worth checking them out. And of course, you're welcome to check out mine. Still kind of a first draft, so I might revise it, streamline it a little bit, adjust it, because obviously things change, and that's, I think, what we all need to take away. Things change, so whatever worked for us in the past, in order, to be the best possible selves, to be the best possible nation, to be the best possible community, may not work in the future. So we have to, just like in science, we have to always check back, okay, so these are our rules now that we want to live by. How well do they actually work in getting us to the goals that we want to achieve? So we always have to get the feedback from reality and see, well, are those rules really helping us get to our goals? And then if not, it's like, okay, well, maybe we have to go change something. That's just, we have to keep learning, and we have to keep observing, and we have to keep critically evaluating. That's just the way it is. That's the responsibility we have. So that's why I'm telling you, don't take it from me. Research and create your own tools, your own rules, and by all means, don't lose your independence over too long didn't read. Okay, and here's a list. Also, lots of things on there. So this list will also be available to you in the recording. So let me just jump out of this mode, go back to, let's see, stop sharing, and I mean, I guess it's time for questions. Let's see. Let me just scan through let's see what we have here. Yeah, please bear with me. This is sort of one of the first times I'm actually doing this. Thank you. Thanks for the encouragement. Yes, Jay, well, that's I'll leave that up to you if you want to write astronomy facts about this meeting. Okay, I can put up, well, okay, somebody's asking Jay here if the PowerPoint is going to be in iCollege. I'll certainly pass that along to him.
I'm here. Okay. I responded to him. I'm going to try and I'm going to post mine on iCollege, just ask him for a reminder. And the info is for my students. Anybody, every talk you watch, just write down 3 facts. I've been keeping track of who's here. You can email it to me. We'll be good.
Okay, let's see if there are any questions for me. Yeah, the monthly notes of the Royal Astronomical Society. And okay, so only need 3 facts from the whole meeting. Those might be other instructors instructing their own students for extra credit. Well, basically, my students, if you want to submit any of these talks for for extra credit, you can pick any particular one. Yeah, just write a brief summary, then the title of the talk and the name of the author. You can submit that under the assessments, assignments, extra credit tab, the Dropbox. Yeah, some of these I can't answer. I think, Jay, have you gotten those questions already? About
any of the ones from my students, I was kind of responding in the chat with. So.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm just kind of scanning through the thread now. Okay, so yes, yeah, I mean, I was really surprised. I guess the Poynter Institute, that's what Jeff's pointing out. I think they're more in the background, and that's kind of, by design. But they have been promoting for over 25 years, just the high standards of journalism and being factual, being transparent. And I looked at their sponsors, and it really had. I'm not into media, but I do see names like all over the board, like Koch brothers or Koch brothers. They were sponsors, or Washington Post, or affiliates, or whatever. So they really have managed to stay pretty neutral and stick to being factual. So it's really worth checking out their resources, and they're teaching courses. They have YouTube's webinars on how you can get better trained at fact checking. So I really encourage everybody to go check them out. Let's see. I think there's been a discussion, that in the end, Peter, you're right. I mean, it's pretty impossible to convince people who buy into the most ridiculous nonsense that it's bogus. So that's basically why I'm putting the responsibility. I mean, all you can do really is be responsible for your own mind. And but that I think is already a huge step, because we haven't really lived up to that responsibility in the past. And even if we look at, don't want to be patriotic here, but if we look at the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, it's basically a civic responsibility. We always think of, what are our rights as citizens? But we really have duties as citizens, at being a citizen. And having become a citizen very recently and sworn my oath to uphold and protect the Constitution, we do have the civic duty to be informed about what's going on in our society. And I think fact-checking, or at least having the tools and being aware, that the information we're getting from everyone and anywhere, from every media platform, or through the TV, be it mainstream, be it fringes, even mainstream media, especially if something's late breaking, they may put out conclusions that later they have to retract. So we really, our own brain, we have the ultimate responsibility and the civic duty given to us by our founding fathers to make the best judgment call and be informed what is fact, what is fiction. So let's step up. People are dying. It's at that point we just can't, we don't have the time to entertain any BS. Let's do our duty. My final words. Okay. Are there any final questions? Otherwise, I'm just going to stop the recording, bid everyone farewell, and wish you the best in this jungle.